Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. Join us, Eric Geis and Nick Johnson, as we dive into today's best EdTech tools, tips, and practices. We do the research so you can teach your class. Remember to follow us on social media like Instagram, X, or Facebook by looking for the handle @EdTech Throwdown. Now please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the EdTech Throwdown. This is episode 184 called 10 Project Ideas for Students to Show Mastery. In this episode, we'll discuss some of our favorite projects that you can use in your classroom to check for student mastery. Of course, we'll share some of our favorite EdTech and AI tools along the way. This is another episode you don't want to miss. Check it out.
All right, back for episode 184, and this episode is kind of a little bit of a stretch as far as, why we came about to do this one. So I was down in the copying room. Our copiers were down, like the ones that were close to the ones that are in the media center where I work.
Because they're always down, all add in.
Yeah, they're down a lot, but they do get a lot of use because the one is the only colored copier that we have. All right, so a lot of use up here. So I went down to the copiers, and there are a couple of younger teachers. I could say younger now because I feel like once you get 20 years in, you're experienced. You're not older, you're experienced. I'm an experienced teacher, and I was just listening to them talk about how education has changed so much over the past 10 years because they have graduated high school within the last 10 years. All right, and I was like, well, has it really changed? And they look at me like, who's the old guy? Who's the old guy? Well, I'm the old guy. Has it really changed? Like, I feel like we're always chasing something in education. What we're chasing has changed, but I don't feel like it's changed that much. And I said, all right, tell me your favorite project ideas that you use in your classroom. Like, if you were assessing students and you wanted to make sure that they had mastery, tell me your top 10 teaching strategies or your projects that you like. So they were scrambling off a lot of the projects that they still use, and I said, I did that 35 years ago when I was in grade school. I was like, do people even call it grade school anymore? Is that like a generational thing?
But anyway, they might call it grade school.
Yeah, so I was in there and I was like, well, let's talk this out a little bit. I said maybe the implementation, how we use them or how we make them is different, but I go, the ideas are very much the same. So today we're going to talk about those ideas that are very much the same, but how we use EdTech and we use other ways to enhance these lessons so they're still relevant and interesting to the kids.
Yeah, and we're talking mastery, so some of this you might consider like assessment if you wanted to, which you kind of alluded to. Some of these could just, you could just straight up call them projects. That's one of the things I like about this particular topic or episode or whatever, is that it could really be, it can be whatever you want. And that's the beauty of it, is it doesn't matter. You just need to see what students know and what they don't know in maybe a traditional way, because a lot of these have been around for a while, but what you'll notice none of these is like, the traditional paper and pencil test. Not to knock it. I use them for sure, and they've got a place, and they exist, and students have to be good at them, and, because that's like a part of education, but we did try to stay away from that largely to focus on other things.
I did throw in the old paper test in this. I'm not going to lie. I snuck that one in under your nose a little bit. Might have deleted one that you put in there. But I want to show some love to that old school paper test, but maybe show a little different way that you could do it.
I was going to say, I saw you sneak it in, but there is a twist on it, which is worth mentioning for sure, so I'm glad you pointed that out. I suppose with that, it's a good spot for us to pause to hear a word from the Teach Better Podcast Network, and when we come back, we'll start walking you through some of these mastery project assessment ideas.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, so we are back, and we have 10 of these things. I don't know if we said that in the first little segment here. 10 like general project ideas. Each one is pretty clear what they are, but if we need to, we'll explain what it is. We'll throw in some of the EdTech that we've used, and what is hopefully the most helpful part of this, some of the ways that we have used it. And if you don't mind, I'll just get started with the first one, which is infographics. These are probably one of the easiest ways to have students show mastery as far as teacher prep, because it's right in the title, man, infographic. The students have to include information because that is literally what an infographic is supposed to be. So it lends itself very well to this whole thing. If I want to know how well my students understand intermolecular forces in my chem class, I could say very simply, make me an infographic that differentiates between hydrogen bonds, dipole-dipole forces, and London dispersion forces. And you can set it up however you want, but it should make it evident that you understand the difference between these three with examples and whatever else. Right? I could design that mastery project in 10 minutes of my own time, and then the students have a full class period or two to get this thing done. Obviously, if we're talking EdTech, for me, I'm going to look no further than Canva, just because it's integrated in our school, the kids know it, and if you listen to our show, you know that we love it for this exact purpose.
Yeah, Canva is a great one. A couple others that you could use are Visme. I need someone to correct me on that. Like the pronunciations of words, it's not my strong suit. And the other one's ThingLink. ThingLink is you can take a picture and make it interactive, drop little, almost like little icons on top of it, and link things to those icons to make that image come alive. So those are two other infographic tools that you could use. For me, in my class, we do infographics all the time because we have a branding and design, digital design course, and we make infographics all the time. And we kind of tailor those infographics to the interests of our students. So a lot of times we're looking for design elements. And when you have design elements, you want to make sure that, the students are using them in a way in which it's going to make an image pop. So with that design class, if they're going to make a packing list for college, this is what every student going to college should pack. And they make that, and they make it look really, really good. I mean, a lot of times if you just show them a couple examples and send them on their way, they're very, very good at it. So that is infographics. Next, let's go into posters. And when I'm talking posters here, I'm not talking trifolds. I'm not talking whatever the traditional poster board poster are. I'm talking digital posters. All right, if you have a poster printer at your school, that's great. If the students want to go to the local Staples and get it printed out on the cheap paper, it's not terrible, the pricing of it. Or if you just want to leave their Chromebooks up, they could show it that way, or they could send it to the teacher, and the teacher can kind of, bring each one up on the big presentation screen at the front of the class. But when we say posters can be digitally enhanced to be awesome. All right. For example, I've seen one of our colleagues, they took a calendar, all right, and they made it a poster about a history topic. So they were studying World War I and the causes. So what they did is they made a calendar, and on the outside and throughout the whole poster, they brought up like different types of tanks that were used, different types of, like different strategies, flanking and things like that, all around this calendar. It was embedded in there. And then each day she would start this digital poster with the class, so that would introduce what's coming up today, what they covered the day before, what's coming up in the next week, when the test is, things like that. But it just shows off everything, and then she embedded that digital poster into her website so the kids can go look at it when they're at home.
Yeah, and posters, and you kind of got to this already, but I'll just throw another idea in there. You just got to remember, it doesn't have to be, what you typically think of as a poster. It's things like memes, right? I would count making a meme almost in this theme of a poster, and this can be a really good way to capitalize on something that all the younger students know about, makes up a huge, piece of internet culture that the kids are all, if not deeply involved in, at least aware of, and just kind of makes it fun. We see this a lot with our history classes, where you can say make a meme, where it focuses on a historical figure who's, maybe see like his inner monologue about something that's taking place during that time. So, they might have George Washington who is saying something funny in that meme style, but also commenting on something that George Washington was doing at that time, or some event he was involved in, and that's showing mastery. Because to do that in an academic sense, you got to understand George Washington and what he might be thinking, and how this particular battle, went, and what that led to. It can go in a lot of different directions. So when we say poster, you got to realize it can mean all that different stuff. Again, Canva for this is great. Adobe Express is great as the other Canva competitor. You found some cool new ones. I don't know if they're new, but new to us, like Snappa, Pixlr, Vista Create, all these. Very, very cool.
Yeah, those three were when I was doing my research, because I wanted to see if there's anything new out there. Those three kept popping up, so I took a look at them, and I thought that they were pretty awesome, simplistic tools that you might be able to get some worth out of, especially if you are overwhelmed by Canva and Adobe Express and all the different options there. So I put that in there. Our next one's timelines. Timelines, I still think the king of timelines is ThingLink. I really like ThingLink. I know we went away from it for a little while, but I always come back to it because I think having the ability to do a 360 picture and make that your timeline kind of gives you that submersive feel, and all the things that you could add to the little icons on the timeline. I think that just adds to the flair of the timelines and the effectiveness of the timeline. So I'm going to go with ThingLink there. Timelines are awesome. They fit into any content area. I know that I dropped into a class, and it was a research class, and the teacher wanted them to, this is one of their first exercises to doing research, is to get organized through a timeline. So the kid really, I don't know if he really wanted to be in the research class. I can't really tell you. It didn't seem that interested in research itself, but he was very interested in music. He loves music. He says the reason why he comes to school is because of music. So I sat down with him and I was like, hey, so what is the project like description? They had to do a timeline based on historical context, and it was open-ended beyond that. I said, well, if you really like music, why don't you do something like, you could do the history of music and in a timeline. He goes, I've done that for other classes. He goes, I'd like to do something with music, but maybe something different. And I was like, do you know how, like, on the front lines, they always have musicians, like, banging the drums or playing the flute or whatever, the piccolo or whatever that little small guy is, the recorder, I don't know. And he goes, yeah. I go, well, why don't you do some investigation about the songs on the battlefield that were played by each war or each battle? So he did that, and it turned out pretty awesome. He was able to get music clips of each one of those songs, put that into his timeline. He used ThingLink. It was pretty awesome.
My favorite one here is something called Online Timeline Maker. It's just really cool. It's obviously its whole purpose is building timelines. And if you head there, I think the website is time.graphics. They have a bunch of, they call it public timelines. These are ones that other people have made. It's cool just to scroll through there and see some of the examples. They have really complex, like highly academic looking things with just a ton of information. There's some simple ones. I think any teacher that scrolls through this list is going to be immediately inspired to, try this because it's just so cool. Canva, of course, can do it too. And if you're into timelines, we're going to cut it off here, but we have an entire episode on timelines. Boy, I wish I had looked it up. Somewhere back between 100 and 160, let's say. So if you scroll our catalog, I bet you'll find it in there. Or obviously you could just Google it and it'll pop up. But we spent a lot of time talking about those, so we can pretty sure leave it there for today as we move on to the next idea, which is called Choose Your Own Adventure. That could mean a lot of different things. And one of the ways that we use this term, choose your own adventure, is a slide deck. This is at least the example I'll give, where different things in the slides are clickable links that don't take you to websites, but they take you to other slides in the deck. So for example, picture a Google slide deck where slide 1 has an image. Let's choose a subject area. I'll just say biology, parts of a cell. So there's an image of a cell. The student puts that in there, but they have to create ways that somebody can click the different organelles within the cell, say the nucleus, and when you click it, it takes you to slide 9, because you can do that in slide decks. You can link from one slide to another. It takes you to slide 9, where you read about the nucleus. And then usually when my students do this, I make sure one of the things is that it's easy to navigate. So from slide 9, there should be a little home button. And the home button is really just a link back to that original slide so you can quickly navigate back and forth. And you can just sort of play around. This is a cool teaching tool for you, the teacher, to share. It's like a nice way to give students access to that information. But, in almost all cases, anything that you've ever done as a teaching tool, you can ask the kids to do it too. And that's where Choose Your Own Adventure comes into play, is having them design these slide decks. Personally, I think Google Slides, the linking within there is the easiest option. Canva, of course, you can do slide decks there, and you can link. Sometimes I find the Canva linking a little bit clunky, so I would stay away from it, but maybe if you've used it enough, you're used to that and you can handle it. You can also do this in PowerPoint, although I think keeping it internet-based in Google Slides probably still makes the most sense for Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah, I do like Google Slides for that one. I will tell you the Canva is getting better with their linking, which is good to see. But let's move on to our next one. This is one that I've been doing a lot with classes this year, and this is student-made games. I had one class that we were making board games digitally in Canva. So what we did is we used our poster plotter, and what I had them do over in Canva is make their board games, and then we printed out those board games on the poster plotter. You don't need a poster plotter. A lot of copiers have 11 by 17 capabilities to print. You just need to buy a ream of that paper, which is pretty inexpensive, and then you can have them develop their board game. And what I did when the poster plotter was down, I had them do it on 11 by 17, 2 halves, and they taped them together and we laminated them and they looked awesome. They also designed all their game pieces on Canva, and then we just got some die to roll. Or they used a digital die on YouTube where they just click a button and each time it's randomized. So they made their board games, and they were actually making these board games for another class, the middle school class. So it was a high school class making it for the middle school class. They took them over. It was an awesome day for everybody. It was good. I also had a couple classes recently make escape the rooms for other classes. It was an honors class making it for a regular class. So when you're talking escape the rooms, they need to know their stuff and how to manipulate the content in order to make that puzzle. All right, so the content is the most important thing, and then the puzzle is kind of easy because you can find creative ways to make content fit a lock. All right, if you do a matching, for example, when they match up, there's a number associated with it in the letter, so they could just add. If it's C, that equals the number 3, and the definition was number 4, you add those 2 up and it gives you 7. That gives you a combo or a password. So there are different escape the room puzzles that are digital, If you go over to flippity.net, that's one of my favorite ones. You could get your digital locks there. You could do that with Google Forms as well, but flippity.net has a lot of different escape the room puzzles over there that you could use. And then the two that I kind of did some research on, and I did this before making, I think I did 4 escape the rooms in the last 2 weeks, made 4 different ones. So I was looking for ways to make them different because I know there's some overlap in classes. Maybe one kid, I think I saw him in there 3 times. So he was in 3 of the teachers' classes, which was pretty cool because he said that they were different enough that he didn't get it, but he said by the 3rd one he was in the right mindset that it was definitely an advantage. So I used Discovery Puzzle Maker for a lot of puzzles. You could go get your traditional crosswords, you could go get your traditional, jigsaw puzzle, that type of stuff over there. And then there's another one called Interacti, and I'll have that link in the show notes. And it's pretty generous with its teacher trial, I guess. So go check those out for some interactive puzzles you could use. You could use them in an escape the room, or you could just have them standalone puzzles for a do now or an exit ticket.
Yeah, Interacti looks super cool. They have tons of great examples of companies that use this. Merck uses it on one of their websites to help train employees. A lot of it's gamification stuff, making these interactive little game boards, but super cool and great for this thing, these student-made puzzles and stuff. So that is great. The next one we've got is podcasts, and I'll combine this with just audio recordings in general. You could make this large scale where you do a class podcast and every student's got an episode on a different topic. This could also be much smaller scale, and we see this a lot with our foreign language teachers where the students just have to go sit in the hallway and record them speaking about a certain topic, subject, whatever it is, in that language, and then that audio gets submitted, right? What's the difference between that and the podcast? Nothing really, besides the publishing aspect. So we can easily link those two things together. If you're going, full bore, hey guys, we're doing podcasts, you're going to need a little bit more prep because the students have to walk through all kinds of steps like the research, the planning. We call it Shownotes, and it's typical for podcasts where your notes that you look at as you record and talk. I'm looking at them right now as we're making this episode. They got to write those. They got to find a place to record their audio, whether it's just on whatever cell phones they have or whatever laptop computer the school gives them. They probably need to edit that audio. So websites online like Audacity, or I should say Audacity is the free download to a desktop. Wavacity is the online version. Tools like WeVideo can allow them to do that. There's lots of free audio editors out there. And then what you do with that podcast at the end of it is it's always cool and makes it better if you publish it in some way, like just putting it up on YouTube or a class Google site, just so the kids know that it exists in some form for people to listen to. So podcasts and audio, I think, is one of our favorites, probably because we're partial to it. I mean, obviously we have a podcast, so we're in that world. We run a student course on podcasting. I just think it works really well, and we've seen this grow exponentially at school. How many classes now are doing podcasting as one of their units or a way to show mastery? It's got to be close to 10 different teachers, if not more than that.
Yeah, I would say it's probably slightly more. I know we have invited some teachers to have their own podcasts on our network. So I think between our classes that we ran the last couple of years and those teachers, we're up over 60, I think,
right.
Total.
Yep.
So we're getting there.
Yeah, and it works great for mastery because you can't do a podcast or record an audio snippet if you don't know what you're talking about. And if the student doesn't know what they're talking about, it's very evident because they're going to sound awkward. They're going to be stumbling and fumbling over their words. It's just a great way to assess things. And I'll throw in with that video. This was the 7th one we were going to talk about, but it does a lot of the same things. If the kids are creating a video, part of that is more than likely going to be the audio recording to go along with it. The only difference, obviously, is there's some visual aspect to it as well. They can't do that if they don't know what they're talking about.
So let's go through some of the phases, and you're right, between podcasts and video, there are a lot of similar steps that you have to take. Let's just go through some of the EdTech for each one of those phases. So no matter if you're doing a podcast or a video, you have to do some research. One of the research tools that we've been using a lot lately, once you've collected those articles that you want to kind of comb through, Notebook LM is a fantastic one. But there are other. You could use ChatGPT here as well. Just to say, okay, I'm going to attach this PDF, or I'm going to copy and paste this text in here. Please give me a summary of these 3 articles and list the sources next to them. That would be 2 great tools there. If we get into the show notes or the storyboards that you mentioned, we use Google Docs, but Book Creator or Storyboard that. Those 2 are very good at helping students get organized. If you're recording audio for students, if you don't have equipment, my favorite thing is to have them bring in their headphones. It's better if it's not Bluetooth, like iPods. Sometimes they get a little interfery, staticky. But if you have something that they could plug in to their iPhone, that's a very easy and sufficient way of doing it. Audacity, which is good on anything but a Chromebook, that will also allow you to record and edit, and so will Wavosity, which is Audacity but at a web page form. It's browser based, so you can do your recording and editing on any of those. As far as publishing, you have several ways to publish these videos. You could, in podcasts, you could do YouTube for either one. If you're doing a podcast, all you have to do is throw an image on top of it, and that will suffice for YouTube purposes, and you can put your podcast there. Canva, you could use sites on Canva, you could use Google Sites, or you could simply just put them into slide presentations. If you want to go get some good slide presentations, I'd recommend Slides Mania, Slides Carnival, Slides Go. Those are some good things there. For the video alone, we use WeVideo here because our school pays for it, but there is another one that I'd like to recommend because it's free, and that's DaVinci Resolve. Now they have DaVinci Resolve Studio, which is like $250 a license or $275 a license, something like that. But they do have a free version that is pretty amazing that you could use. And if you're Adobe school, Adobe Premiere is fantastic. It's just the learning curve is a lot more involved.
Yeah, so those, there's a lot you can do with that. I'll just wrap it up by saying there's a lot you don't have to do. Any of those can also be done very simply if you want to skip the editing, skip the publishing, and make it focus on content. You can do that for either of those. So those are some of my favorites as well. Next up, we got portfolios. Underutilized by me, and every time we talk about them, I always think, man, I should do this more. I think the problem with teaching something like AP Chemistry is that I have to move through so much so quick. It's like I don't have time for this, or I would at least have to think a lot about how to do it, but they're just so good, right? Having students keep track of the things they've done to show progress, having them reflect on that progress, you just can't go wrong with it. I know one of our English classes here totally revamped their grading system, and it's built fully around a portfolio. Slide decks work well for this because each slide can be a place to house that work. There's some portfolio-specific tools out there. You've probably heard of them. Padlet's the biggest one. Seesaw, also very huge, and its whole existence is that. It's like digital portfolios, right? But there's a lot of things you could put in that same wheelhouse. Book Creator is one of Geis's favorites, and obviously as the kids are making their book, who's to say that can't also be a place to build the portfolio, or Wakelet, where you're putting in resources, right? Each of those little Wakelet, I don't know what you call them, little tabs or posts, portfolio. And the list could go on here because of how diverse that can mean, this thing can mean. But it's just, a classic tried and true way to show mastery over time, and that's what makes it unique.
I really like portfolios in the upper levels, like your 11th grade year. I think they're perfect there because not only do they show mastery along a long period of time, but it also allows students to use those portfolios as part of their next level of education process, their college admissions. I mean, how cool is it if they're in their English class, if they want to go to school and be an English major, how cool is it if they can share a link with their portfolio in it to colleges so the colleges could get a better idea of who that person is? I feel like that would help students separate themselves from the traditional application, and it would allow colleges to really get to know somebody without having to be there face-to-face with them.
Yep, that's a great idea. It's a great point. The other thing I thought of as you were talking is portfolios would work really good in a project-based class as well. You know, the one we teach now where students are doing like branding and content design. It's a natural place to do a portfolio where they would, you know, here's my projects at the start of this class versus the end. Notice these differences, right? And having them look over all that stuff and present it would be super cool. So you can't beat portfolios. Let's round it out. We got 2 left. One of them is what we talked about at the top of the show, old school assessments, but with a twist, and that twist being the EdTech that can then enhance those assessments.
Right, and this is one that it's kind of near and dear to my heart because I was not the best test taker in school. Tests were not easy for me. I could sit down and talk about a topic, you know, until the sun went down. But when it came to choosing between 4 multiple choice answers, I usually could get it down to 2, and I usually guessed wrong if I had to guess at that point. So some people have those test taking strategies and those skills, and they're just innately good at them. I had to really have to work at them. So being able to get some type of feedback right away that might help me go through that process is huge. And one of the tools that we've been talking about lately that's AI-based that teachers can set up is Snorkel. And it will provide the students with instant feedback, but it will also provide the teachers with instant feedback on some of the misconceptions that the students may be having and which students fall within those misconceptions. An oldie but a goodie is Moat, and they're doing a lot of upgrades right now or updates within their platform. Moat, you could leave audio feedback, and that's huge because audio feedback is something that a teacher could do quickly. You could record those canned comments and put those into your assessment feedback and things like that. So Moat is an awesome one to check out. And the new one for me is CoGrader. So you get 100 student submissions per month free, and basically what you do is you just upload the student work and it's going to suggest feedback, and the teacher could go in and approve them or make changes to them and things like that. But those types of feedbacks for the essay would be pretty awesome, and I just think it's a nice touch. It's going to save the teacher time, and it's going to be beneficial for the student because it might be able to iron out some of those misconceptions.
Yep, like I said, tests are a part of education today, especially in the United States, for better or worse. So any way you can, help students get better at them is good, and those are some ways to do it for sure. Our final thing, which is another one of your favorites and another classic, is debates. These are often the scariest things for teachers to do. You could lump discussion in there if you want to. But specifically here, we're talking debates where it might be a face-to-face thing where you assign students different viewpoints and they got to sit and speak to each other to decide something, right? Like debate it, come to a conclusion. As the mastery check, this could be something that they have to record, right? That you then watch. This could be something that happens as the whole class listens in and you are sort of scoring them or just commenting as they go. Lots of ways to conduct the debate here.
Yeah, I love debates. I think a lot comes out of debates. I think students need to know the content, not only their own side, but the other side. They need to know about the process behind the content. They need to know about the effects behind the content. They need to know the stakeholders behind the content. There's so much you can do there. So many ways that you can implement them. If we just look at all the projects that we've discussed today, you could probably tie those into debates. The face-to-face debate, rather than having 3-on-3 and the rest of the class trying to pay attention, you could have them record it into a podcast or a video, which you mentioned. There are no-talk debates where you just take out a Google Doc or a Google Slide or whatever you want, and you start with like an outline. And people on one team can write underneath that outline. So if the pros put their 3 major points down, the cons can go immediately do a rebuttal, type it out. And then the pros can type under the rebuttal, their rebuttal to the rebuttal. And you can keep going, and you say, okay, you have 20 minutes. And then after that, you rotate. And basically, you switch debates with another debate group. They read over it and decide the winner, and they provide justification for that. And then maybe you do it one more time, so everyone's getting 3 debates in one period. That's a way to do it. They actually like these, which is strange because, and it's oddly quiet too. They're into them. So I call those no-talk debates, and I just run those on Google Slides. You got a presentation gallery walk. So basically, if you think of, you take a slide deck and you put the pro and the con with the topic that they're doing, and they find unique ways of representing it, and then you do a gallery walk around. There's no talking there either. It's just looking at the content, reading it, see who won, providing a justification, and also poster debates. So you take a 3-section poster. On the right side is pros, on the left side is cons, and in the middle, it's a lot of back and forth there as well. Same thing. Doesn't have to be a lot of talking. You could have them present it if you want, but at the end, students have to pick 3 posters to fully review and do a justification on who won, and really just pull out the main reasons why and provide that justification is huge.
And then a really good way that you could conduct these or help students with their planning that could really fit in with any of them is to bring in one of these digital whiteboard spaces like Canva whiteboards or FigJam or Miro's, another one, where the commenting you were talking about, the pros and cons, whatever it is, that is all happening in this shared digital space, this shared digital whiteboard that all the students are in, and they're like adding sticky notes to, right? The Jamboard is the example from 5 years ago. Boy, what's that new one? Is it Padlet, right? Padlet Sandbox, right? Padlet Sandbox, also really great for this. And I like that as, like I said, a pre-planner because it's going to give some confidence because the students can start the debate knowing that they have some things to talk about. So that's worth throwing in there as well. I think that wraps it up for this episode. This is a tough one to do because that's a ton of stuff, right? A lot of information, but sometimes it's good to package that up, remind yourself that all these project ideas exist, and remind yourself that they can be really excellent ways to assess student mastery. So thanks for checking it out, everybody. And as always, and more importantly, thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the EdTech Throwdown. Do us a couple of favors. Subscribe to our podcast on any major podcast catcher such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Stitcher. Go over to YouTube, search the EdTech Throwdown, subscribe to the channel. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The show's handle is EdTech Throwdown. You can connect with Geis at GeisGotTech, Nick at NickGotTech. You can write us an Apple Podcast review. You could tell your friends about www.edtechthrowdown.com. And lastly, go over and check out our friends over at the Teach Better Podcast Network, a network that we are so proudly involved with. Until next time, remember, go try some EdTech because we will do the research so you can teach your class.